I have always believed there are two types of people in an office environment: those who panic when the fire alarm sounds, and those who calmly ask, "Is this just a drill?" I was always in the latter group. For more than 20 years, I remained steady and unfazed. I coached the anxious ones, guided them through crises, encouraged them, celebrated their early victories. I was the person they contacted when a client became nervous or a project derailed in the middle of the night. Honestly, I was even the guy they called to fix their email signatures. That is the kind of reputation I cultivated. My name is Mark Lewis. I am 51 and work as a senior client strategist at Halbert and Finch, a medium-sized marketing company. We like to describe ourselves as boutique when pitching big clients and agile when we lost them. I have been with the company since the days when people still printed memos, when handshakes were the norm instead of fist bumps. I witnessed 3 rebrands, 2 acquisitions, and over 10 department heads come and go. But I stayed, not because I was trapped, but because I didn't want to leave. I was valuable, dependable, recognized. So, when Emma, my manager who is 31 and prides herself on being vibe forward, invited me to a quick Zoom meeting for alignment, I did not suspect anything unusual. Honestly, I expected it would be about mentoring yet another intern, or maybe a word of thanks for smoothing over the issues with the Sanderson account last week. The call began like any other. Her face appeared on screen in a softly lit home office, plants adorning the background, a coffee mug beside her that read, "Be kind or leave." I smiled and said, "Hey Emma, how are things?" She returned a tight smile. "Hi Mark, thanks for joining. I'll get straight to the point." That sentence carried weight, not haste, but a sense of conclusion. "You've been with us for a long time," she began, her voice sweet yet tense, "and your experience is invaluable." I raised an eyebrow. Whenever someone starts with praise, prepare for the real message. But she went on, "We've received some feedback recently, and I've noticed it too. It concerns your communication style, mostly on Slack." I blinked. "Okay, in what way?" She hesitated briefly, squinting as if reading an invisible script. "It can sound somewhat harsh." I chuckled, not mockingly, just instinctively. "Harsh? How so?" She looked me straight in the eye through the webcam. "You end sentences with periods." I waited for the joke. None came. "Sorry, could you explain?" I asked. "No need to get defensive," she interrupted. "Let me give you an example." She shared her screen. A Slack message appeared in a gray bubble. "Can you check on that report?" It was just that. No exclamation, no emoji, simply a sentence, a request. "Do you see how that might seem cold?" she said. "To whom?" I asked, genuinely interested. "To the team, to clients, to everyone, really." I leaned back, trying to keep a neutral expression. "Emma, that is just a complete sentence." "But it's not about grammar," she answered quickly. "It's about tone. We're aiming to create a friendlier, less formal atmosphere. And the method to achieve that," I explained slowly, "is by removing punctuation entirely." She responded with a patient smile, the kind you would give to a puzzled dog. "We are introducing a new voice, someone who truly understands the energy we want to convey." They are really connecting with the newer clients. I did not even have to ask. She shared it anyway. "Dylan, you remember the summer intern? We have now offered them a full-time position. They will be gradually taking over your accounts in the coming weeks." Dylan, 21, spoke in lowercase, called briefs vibes, and used the crying laughing emoji in formal proposals. I once saw them describe a $1 million project as low-key amazing. I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. "So, this is the situation." Emma leaned in slightly, too prepared. "This is not a punishment, Mark. It is a shift. We are growing and hope you will find a role that better suits your style." That was the moment I understood. She had already moved on mentally and emotionally. I was no longer seen as a person being let go, but as a task to be removed. I closed my laptop, not in frustration, just to stop hearing her voice bouncing inside my head. I stood up, smoothed my shirt, thanked her for the discussion. She offered her hand, I shook it, and that was the end. I did not cry, yell, storm out, or demand answers. I simply left. Once home, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water. My hands shook slightly, not out of fear, but uncertainty about what was next. I had just been dismissed, or perhaps shifted into a different role that felt foreign, Suddenly, I could no longer communicate as I used to. Habitually, I opened my laptop once more and found myself facing a blank Word document. I longed to write something, anything at all, maybe just to make sense of it. The blinking cursor awaited my words silently. I began typing, pouring out everything I felt, before finally pressing the period key to conclude. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I simply kept staring at the cursor's steady blink. I almost hesitated to place the final dot in that sentence. The first couple of days were like being trapped in a recurring nightmare. I woke up at 6 o'clock out of routine, brewed coffee, checked my email, and then realized there was no work waiting for me, no crises to manage, no eager new intern asking me where the Google Drive was located, even after I had explained it twice the previous week. Messages from friends started arriving, expressing disbelief at what had happened. One sent me an article titled, "Quiet Firing, the New Corporate Ghosting," while another shared one called, "Are You Too Old for Tech Culture?" As if the answer needed stating, I nodded while reading, realizing I was not isolated. Somewhere between synergy and vibes, the foundation beneath us shifted. It felt like a generational cultural takeover, and I hadn't even noticed until I was surrounded by the ruins. My wife, Jen, did her best to ease the hardship. "Perhaps it is for the best," she said that first evening at dinner, casually tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, as she often did when careful not to speak wrongly. I stared at the roast chicken on my plate, as if it were something unknown, something alien. "For the best," she said. Mark Lewis shrugged. "You despise the late nights and sudden urgent demands. Perhaps now you could, I am not sure, inquire or even launch your own venture." She meant well, I understood that. But it hurt because I didn't dislike the long hours. What I despised was feeling cast aside. I tried to act indifferent, kept myself occupied, sorted through the garage, took aimless walks, told myself maybe I was outdated, maybe I was too straightforward, perhaps the world no longer appreciated thoroughness. Maybe professionalism had become an optional mask, worn only when not striving to appear casual. Then on the fourth day, a notification blinked in my inbox. An old intern, Jules, sent a screenshot from Slack. No introduction. It was Dylan, the person who took my place. In the screenshot, a client asked for a progress report on a campaign deadline. Dylan responded, "Hi, I think it's coming together kind of chaotic right now, not gonna lie." Below, the client replied with a single word. "What?" I stared at the screen for a full minute. Not because it was amusing, but because it was genuine. This was the person they selected instead of me. Someone who managed client deadlines with emojis and guesswork. More screenshots appeared over the next several days. Missed deadlines, careless responses, clients CC'd late, or never at all. In one, a client requested final figures. Dylan answered, "I don't know, I'll check with Jaime. She knows numbers," laughing out loud. Then came the email. The subject still read, "Hi and F." It was from Evan, a client I had cooperated with for 6 years. Mark Lewis and I built a brand from the ground up together, endured 2 mergers, and made it through 3 reorganizations. His message was brief. He said, "Hey Mark, I was wondering if you are still connected with our team. Things have become strange lately. Let me know. Hope you're doing well." I did not respond. I could not. What was I supposed to say? Number. They let me go for simply using punctuation. Good luck. I shut the laptop, stood up, poured a drink I had no desire to drink, sat on the porch in the darkness, and gazed at the silent street. That's when the anger began. It did not arrive as yelling or breaking walls. Instead, it came as a quiet, steady beat in my chest. A soft resentment that whispered, "They treated you unfairly," and yet I just walked away smiling. For over 2 decades, I had mentored more than 50 interns, supported at least 12 managers through crises. I had stayed late, covered others' responsibilities, cleaned up mistakes that were not mine without ever asking for recognition. I told myself it was all for the team, for the greater cause, for loyalty. Yet I was replaced with a cat emoji. I began to write, not for anyone, just for myself. In a notebook I discovered in the closet, I started listing moments, proof. The time I caught a senior lead falsifying analytics and took responsibility for her. The time a junior employee accidentally copied a competitor on a strategy document. I took the blame. I recorded the chat messages, the late-night calls, the emergency fixes that were not mine to handle, but I managed anyway. I recorded every thank you I had received privately, and every time I was overlooked publicly. I discovered a second notebook, then a third. At that point, I wasn't preparing a case. Not yet. I didn't even know who the audience might be or if there would be one at all. But I was creating something. Maybe it was a matter of stubbornness. Maybe it was a way to protect myself. Or perhaps it was the only method I understood to still feel valuable. I wasn't exactly angry. It was something quieter and colder, something resembling clarity. While I was rearranging the spice rack because, apparently, that was what I did now, my phone rang. I almost ignored it. I had become allergic to calls during the last week. Too many people checking in with voices filled with pity, saying things like, "What a pity and you deserved greater," which somehow made me feel worse. But this time, it was Liam, a former intern and one of the best. Quiet, perceptive, incredibly sharp. I had mentored him 2 years before, and the last I knew, he was working in digital strategy at a competing firm. I answered. Liam did not greet me. "Mark," he said, voice somewhere between panic and disbelief. "Something is happening. You have to see this." I froze, cumin jar in one hand. "What do you mean?" "You won't believe it," he said. "Dylan just ruined the Sanderson account." My stomach churned. "What happened?" "They sent a man. They replied to a client complaint about data loss with a cat emoji." "What?" "I'm serious." During the server migration, one of the campaign's data backups was accidentally erased. Naturally, Sanderson panicked and demanded an immediate plan to fix the issue. Dylan replied in the client thread with LOL. I don't even know TBH meow. It sounded like he was admitting to a serious mistake. I was speechless for a moment. Then I finally said, "They answered a client with millions at stake about data loss using a meme cat." No joke, that actually happened. The entire team lost composure. The conversation went quiet for 5 minutes. Then someone from Sanderson Legal jumped in. I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, forgetting the cumin jar. Emma was completely overwhelmed and being pulled into consecutive crisis meetings. HR got involved, and apparently, the CEO was C.Ed. A formal review was on the way. A short, involuntary laugh slipped out of me. Liam paused silently on the other end and quietly said, "This is not funny. The whole team is freaking out." I replied, "Of course not." But I could not hide my smile. It was not because I enjoyed their turmoil, but because of how ironically timed everything was. After 22 years of standing firm, I was let go for being too precise, too blunt, for using a simple period. And now, less than a week later, the intern who replaced me had just ruined a $1,200,000 deal with a cat emoji and a shrug. Liam sent me screenshots that made the message thread look like a satire of itself. The client said, "This is unacceptable. We need an explanation and a recovery plan." Dylan simply answered, "LOL, I don't." I hardly knew what to think. Honestly, meow. Below that was silence. Then a solitary response arrived from Sanderson's legal department. They wrote, "We will be reviewing our agreement terms considering this response." I stared at that line for quite some time. I could feel it, a surge of adrenaline I hadn't experienced since I was still employed. I did not reply to Liam. Instead, I just thanked him, closed the messages, and leaned back in my chair. A few minutes later, Jen walked into the kitchen and noticed the expression on my face. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I believe so," I answered. Something inside me changed that evening. I slept soundly until morning. No tossing or turning, no staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning, wondering if I was the issue. No wondering if I should have used more smiley faces in professional conversations. Just deep, complete rest. The next morning, I woke up to an email from someone whose name I had not seen in a long time. The subject was "Quick Meeting." It came from the CEO's assistant. "Hello, Mark. I hope all is well with you. There has been a lot of internal activity, and David wanted to know if you would be willing to have a brief meeting this week to reconnect and talk over a few matters. Please share your availability." I did not reply right away. I brewed coffee first, sat down with it, and watched the sun rise above the neighbors' rooftops. Then I composed a response. "Glad to reconnect. Thursday morning suits me best. Please let me know what time works for David. no emojis, no casual lowercase wording, just a full, properly punctuated sentence. I settled back, watching the steam rise from my cup, and allowed myself a slight smile. It turns out that a cat emoji can derail a deal much quicker than a period ever could. I arrived at the Halbert and Finch office 5 minutes early, just like I used to do. The front desk was staffed by someone new, wide-eyed, with earbuds in, tapping on her phone as if her life depended on some group chat. She glanced up, hesitated for a moment. I did not introduce myself, simply gave a small nod. She buzzed me in. The carpet was still that odd, modern charcoal color that never quite seemed clean. The branding wall had been refreshed. New logo, new slogan. They want to seem edgy, I thought with a smirk. Naturally, they did. They placed me in a glass conference room on the 14th floor. The same city view, the same annoyingly loud air vent, the same chairs I had sat in during countless late-night strategy meetings. I leaned back in one, arms folded, waiting. David, the CEO, was the first to enter. He appeared cheerful but nervous, dressed in a sharp blazer. Behind him came Emma, no smile, no blazer, just a turtleneck and tired eyes. She avoided making eye contact. "Mark Lewis," David said, extending his hand. "I appreciate you coming in." I shook it, curious about what this was leading to. He laughed a bit too loudly. "Well, I think we both recognize there's been some turbulence." I nodded. "That is certainly one way to put it." Emma opened her laptop but said nothing. David cleared his throat. "We, could really use your perspective, your insight, your experience. Frankly, I just waited and let the silence stretch." "Mark Lewis invited me to join in a consulting role," he explained. "Not on a full-time basis, but simply to contribute to stabilizing the situation. Clients have confidence in you, and internally, your expertise could be invaluable." I responded by asking for a clear definition of consult. Mark hesitated. He mentioned flexible hours, probably around 10 hours each week at first, determined case by case. I declined the offer. Both fell silent. Politely, I added it almost like an afterthought. Emma finally looked up. "You are not even going to listen to the terms," she said. I replied, "I already have." A long pause followed. Leaning forward, resting my arms on the table, I expressed, "I didn't come here to back down. I came to confront the mess created when I was pushed out." Mark attempted to laugh softly. The sound faded abruptly. Undeterred, I continued, "I want to leave something behind. Consider it a final gesture of goodwill." I took a folder from my bag and slid it across the table. "Just plain documents, no logos, no extras." Emma asked, "What is this?" I answered, 22 years summarized in 5 pages. You may see it as a post-mortem or a prologue, depending on your next move." She opened it, her eyes scanning the heading, and I noticed her nostrils flare just a bit. I stated, "A period is not an attack." Rising to my feet, I added, "You may keep it and do as you please." Mark appeared puzzled. "You are not going to explain it to us?" I said, "No need. It is clearly written and punctuated." I left without any handshakes, and nobody tried to stop me. That evening, I received an email from a friend still on the inside. The memo had been circulated furtively like forbidden material. Half of the group appreciated it deeply. The other half described it as somewhat confrontational. I laughed aloud. The document was not hostile. It was straightforward. I discussed clarity and how it fosters trust. I talked about tone, explaining that it results from consistency rather than eccentricities. I shared how communication goes beyond grammar. It's about attitude, showing how language can be inviting without being insincere. I provided examples, narrated stories. I concluded with a simple statement. Being understood is the most professional thing you can achieve. By the following morning, the memo had spread, not to the media, but through Slack conversations, LinkedIn circles, and even a Reddit discussion named, "This guy lost his job for using periods." Then, the coldest memo ever appeared. I did not share it again because I had no need. The messages began arriving 2 days later. A fintech founder wrote that he treated the memo like scripture. A non-profit leader asked if I could address her leadership team about internal tone and culture. Someone else offered me a retainer just to review his company's Slack etiquette. "We did not realize how bad it had become until we read your piece," he confessed. Just like that, I was active again, not rehired, not returning, but reborn. I accepted projects that genuinely interested me, declined those that felt performative. I stopped seeking stability and started seeking connection. There is a difference. A week later, Liam messaged me. They are still referring to your memo during strategy discussions. I answered, let me guess, without giving credit. He replied with a laughing emoji. I responded simply with a thumbs up, followed by a period. I never aimed to become famous or sought revenge. All I wanted was to express myself honestly. It turned out I was not out of touch. I was merely speaking a language they had yet to learn to value. 3 months later, I found myself standing beneath the bright stage lights at a leadership seminar in Denver, dressed in my black button-up shirt, sleeves creased at the elbows, collar sharply pressed. This shirt had been my companion for client presentations, for entrances and exits, for apologies that were not mine to make, and for successes I never acknowledged. It had transformed into something like a shield. The gathering was named The Language of Leadership, and I was the last speaker on the panel. It felt like a strange moment of closure. I was neither a vice president nor a founder with an enormous company worth billions. I didn't have a TED Talk to my name. I was just a man who had once been dismissed for using periods. As I stepped onto the stage, a voice whispered from the front row, "Not quietly enough. That's the punctuation guy." I smiled, took up the microphone, and said, "Absolutely." The crowd laughed, but it was warm laughter, the kind that recognizes and respects. They had read my memo, those same people who months earlier would have dismissed me as just another outdated corporate figure now saw me as a communicator, a mentor, a voice deserving attention. I did not speak about revenge, incompetence, or anyone named Dylan. Instead, I focused on presence, on clarity, on leading by action rather than by mood. I reflected on how punctuation simply serves as a mirror. It does not create tone. It only reflects what is already there. That pause, when used skillfully, speaks far louder than any exclamation mark ever could. Later, a group gathered with signs saying, "Young founders, product leaders." A woman shared she had printed my memo and placed it above her workspace. A young man named Trevor, in his early 20s, wearing a hoodie and clearly fueled by too much caffeine, asked if I would guide him through a major shift. "I need someone who stays calm when things get complicated," he explained. I agreed, not because I was seeking work, but because I saw in his eyes a familiar sharpness and restlessness, the way mine once looked. This marked the start of a new pattern. I held calls with beginner teams in Lisbon and weekly planning meetings with a nonprofit in Toronto. I also created a mentorship group limited to 5 or 6 people, former interns, junior creatives, and developers who had moved past youthful promise but were not yet senior. I shared lessons I had not been told when I began. Clear thinking will protect your reputation. Learn to embrace silence. Listen carefully before speaking. Arrive 10 minutes early and offer a handshake as if it still carries importance. They paid attention, not because I was flashy, but because I never tried to be. I continued to use periods properly. I still sent thank you notes the traditional way. I stood whenever someone entered the room. Some called it outdated. I called it grounding. One Thursday afternoon, as I worked on a new presentation, it became clear that professionalism is not dead. It has simply been ghostwritten. When my phone vibrated, the caller was an unknown number. I almost dismissed it. Then the name appeared on the screen. Emma, just the name, no image, no symbols. The message said, "Hey, just wanted to say I think I finally understand. Hope you're doing well." I looked at it for a long time. It was not exactly an apology. Not quite. But it was not nothing either. Part of me longed to reply, to say thanks, to hope she had found her footing after everything, to ask how the team was doing, how Dylan had recovered, if they still use cat symbols in client messages. But I did not. Instead, I locked the phone, set it aside. Some talks are best kept as whispers from the past. I reopened my laptop. The cursor blinked, waiting. I adjusted the font, cracked my knuckles, and began writing the new speech. Professionalism is not a suit or a formal closing or a perfectly arranged presentation. It is showing up when others do not. It is completing what you begin. It is speaking clearly amidst chaos and allowing your quiet to carry half the meaning. The words came smoothly now, not because I aimed to prove something, but because I no longer needed to. This was not a return, not a brand makeover. It was simply me doing what I had always done, this time on my own terms. I typed until the sun sank low behind the window blinds and the cursor reached the page's end. Then I hit send and finished the sentence with a period.